Solange Mougin joins me on the set to take a look at what's been making headlines today. Hi, Solange.
Hi, Jeannie.
Obviously, lots of focus today on this 75th anniversary of the liberation of the Nazi death camp Auschwitz.
Yeah, and as we can see on the local French newspaper Ouest de France, there's a phrase that keeps popping up in French papers, but also international ones, n'oublions jamais, or may we never forget. And forgetting this unforgettable horror is becoming something that world leaders, the press, and survivors at the commemoration today are increasingly worried about as the last of the Holocaust survivors age and die. As 93-year-old David Marks said in West France, quote, "We want the next generation to know what we lived so that it can never happen again." Now, L'Humanité, the French paper, says that one of the problems that the world now faces is that we've largely based the transmission of the Holocaust on the survivors. We've relied on them to talk about their experiences in order to be able to talk about the war. And with fewer survivors now, the ways of not forgetting need to be changed.
Another big theme that's coming out in the press today is not letting the political, the ideological trends that led to the Holocaust repeat themselves again today. How is the anniversary being juxtaposed with politics?
Well, the New Yorker discusses this, quote, politics of memory in a piece about last Thursday's gathering of world leaders in Israel for the anniversary. And it argues that Benjamin Netanyahu is using the history of the Holocaust to political ends. That when he said at the ceremony that, quote, Jewish people faced annihilation and, quote, the world largely turned their backs on us, end quote, Netanyahu was, quote, flattening history to make a dogmatic claim, driving home the argument of the need for Jewish power, or his vision of the need for Jewish power. And the piece ends by wondering if all of this is inevitable, if the use of historic memories for political ends was bound to happen. And now The Atlantic also covers this and asks this question, but on literary terms. It takes us through how the writings of Elie Wiesel and Primo Levi have shaped our view of the tragedy, how reconciliation and not retribution has become the message. And The Atlantic says that all of these visions of the Holocaust need to be kept alive in order for never again to never happen again.
All right, let's focus now on Eastern Africa, where swarms of locusts have decimated crops in areas that were already experiencing widespread hunger.
Yeah, and as the front page of the Swiss paper Le Temps tells us, billions of locusts have descended on areas of Somalia, Ethiopia, and Kenya. Kenya, which actually hasn't seen an outbreak like this in 70 years. Now, the figures that Jeune Afrique tell us are mind-boggling. A single swarm can contain 200 billion crickets, and they can eat some 400,000 tons of food in just one go. And even a small swarm can eat a daily diet of the food needed to feed 35,000 people. That's in a single day. Anyway, the catastrophe, the site says, has hit farmers hardest in a region that's already been hit hard by climate change and drought, and not to mention political unrest in some areas.
Staying in Africa now, Solange, you found an article about growing cities across the continent.
Yeah, The Conversation, the website of academics, has an interesting article about population growth in cities in Africa. And it debunks the myth that cities on the continent are getting bigger because of an exodus of farmers and people from rural areas. It says that actually 2/3 of the population in 22 African cities, the growth is actually coming from within those cities. And the article also talks about how countries are tackling this huge issue of population growth. And it says that there are many states and countries that are relying on developers to create housing, but without much thought to poorer populations, which means that in the last decades, there's been a doubling of the number of people who live in slums.
Another big story today. Tributes are pouring in to basketball star Kobe Bryant, the 41-year-old who was killed in a helicopter crash on Sunday. And there's been tributes not just in the United States, but around the world.
Yeah, and the 41-year-old's face is on newspapers across the globe today. For the French daily L'Équipe, a shining star has gone out. The paper pays a long tribute to the 5-time NBA champion and double Olympic gold medalist, who they say had a status along par with Michael Jordan's, or he was one of the best in NBA history. But his legacy isn't as straightforward as some papers are painting it to be. The New Yorker tells us that there was a darker side to Kobe Bryant, including accusations of raping a 19-year-old girl. Now, the case was settled out of court. He made her sign a non-disclosure agreement, and referring beyond this to his own demons, Bryant said, quote, he could be, quote, angry, he could be selfish and warped by his overwhelming competitive instincts, end quote. Controlling this ugliness of greatness, as he called it, and controlling his image were also what Kobe Bryant was about.
Now, the news of Kobe Bryant's death broke just before the LA Grammy Awards, the big music tribute. There were many tributes then, of course, to the basketball star at the ceremony. But on a lighter note, there was also quite a bit of flamboyant fashion.
There was, and a lot of flamboyant fashion among men. We always talk about women's fashion on the red carpet, but I'd like to focus this time on men's fashion, particularly because the Grammys is going through a scandal about whether it's sexist, not diverse enough, and not transparent enough about how they vote. And I thought it appropriate to highlight some of that fashion. As Vogue tells us, it was quite androgynous. Steve Lacy wearing a skirt, Lil Nas X wearing a pink dominatrix cowboy outfit, and my favorite is actually in Vanity Fair. It's Billy Porter, who, as Vanity Fair tells us, wore a slinky leotard and a motorized hat, those tassels that go in front of his face, and it has already gone viral on the internet.
That is a great outfit. Yep. All right, a big shout out, though, to Billie Eilish, who won all 4 top prizes for a teen sensation. That is a rare feat at the music industry's highest honors. Solange, thank you so much for that look at the press today. Thanks to you for watching. Do stay with us here on France 24, and don't forget, if you want a closer look at the press review, you can always check it out on our website, france24.com.